Okay, today we're talking about elections in the era of media.
You're not going to the elections in Zimbabwe. Now that we have TikToks, Twitter, Facebook, and so on and so on, what are you going to expect as you go towards elections? What people are using these social media platforms to articulate their messages? What are you going to expect as you go forward?
Firstly, I want to highlight that 2023 and 2024 are key years for elections across the globe, particularly also in Africa and in Southern Africa. So Zimbabwe is not the only country that has elections coming up. So this is a critical conversation that we are having, and it's quite timely, not only for Zimbabweans, but for the entire region. And I think for me, what I want to emphasize, coming from a background of media law, but also from the perspective of trying to promote free expression and media freedom, I'd want to emphasize that social media has presented a great platform, for media organizations to be able to seek, receive, and impart information, which is quite critical during elections to ensure that citizens make informed decisions. So my expectation is that in this era of media convergence, organizations, media institutions, journalists, and media outlets are going to utilize these platforms to ensure they disseminate information, including to the rural and marginalized communities in Zimbabwe.
Thank you so much.
I wanted to start on a positive note, obviously, because we should not undermine the importance of social media and all these forms in the information ecosystem and in informing elections. But yes, I want to highlight that when you reflect on elections across the globe, Nigeria, Ghana, Uganda, and Zimbabwe also, we noted elections are also an environment where, particularly on social media, there's an increase in the spread of disinformation, being information that is false and that is particularly to mislead. And what I would want to say, particularly to the ordinary citizens receiving information, is that it's important to verify information, verify the source of information. And one key takeaway is that when something is trending, it does not mean it is factual or it is genuine and truthful. And then with regards to the creation of information or the dissemination of information by the citizens themselves, I would also want to highlight that it's important to ensure that whatever information we are communicating and disseminating also truthful, because we have amendments to the Criminal Law Codification Reform Act, which criminalize transmitting false data messages. So as citizens, as we'll be communicating also through social media during this time, it's important to ensure that we take caution. But also, as you know, there's also been a trend, particularly under the charge of violence. So during this time as well, it's important that as citizens communicate, you ensure that you are not bordering on or that your communication will not be presumed or taken to be inciting violence, because that has also been one key issue that is impacting information dissemination, but also free expression by the citizens as far as this election era is concerned. And we've seen that in Zimbabwe as well. And I mean, the perspective even of political parties, I'm sure some of you might have come across this article. I always reference it a lot, which was an article written about our 2018 election. It was in The Continent, I think, written by one Dumisani Moyo, and he spoke about the online propaganda wars in Zimbabwe, Marakashi, these are terrorists. So you will see also that in terms of the dissemination of information, there will also be some propaganda online wars that will be happening, which include dissemination of disinformation by political parties and political party supporters, but also which will include even hate speech and even attacks, online gender violence, and even attacks or on the basis of partisan or political affiliation. So those are some of the things also to take note, which has characterized elections in Zimbabwe, but also in different countries in the region.
Thanks so much, Nompilo, for that response. Just guys, if you're just joining us, this morning on Asaka, looking at the elections in the era of social media. This morning is Nompilo Simanjens, as well as Dr. Mphathisini Ndlovu there. Dr. Mphathisini, I've sent you the mic to become a speaker this morning. Please do receive and accept the request there and become a speaker. Let's go back to Nonhlanhla. Let me go back to you before I go to Nompilo on the issue of
Yes, we wrote a paper with my colleagues, Bekizulu Chuma and Lungile Chuma. We're looking at the role of Twitter during elections. We're looking at the struggles between those whom regard as Barakash and the terrorists, and we're looking at the 2018 elections. So one of our arguments is that Twitter or social media in general provide a platform for people to engage in political debates, and sometimes these political debates have got some they take on some negative part in terms of the cyberbullying, in terms of the online hate, and in terms of the propaganda that is there in online spaces. But generally, when we're looking at social media, the argument is generally that social media provides a space for people to engage in political debates. It enables those people who are excluded in mainstream spaces to have a voice, to be able to participate in political discussions. But of course, there is always the negative aspect of social media, which is to do with cyberbullying, which is to do with online hate, which is to do with what some people term mob censorship, where ordinary people can actually participate in certain discussions in a negative manner and actually attack political opponents or attack people with different views. Yeah, so in terms of the paper that we wrote, we discovered that there was a lot of these political engagements on social media, and our argument really was that sometimes we tend to celebrate social media in terms of promoting democracy, in terms of enabling to participate, but there's always the darker side of social media, and that darker side it's seen through issues to do with cyberbullying, issues to do with various forms of online hate. But there's always the darker side of social media, and that darker side it's seen through issues to do with cyberbullying, issues to do with various forms of online hate. Thank you.
In Zimbabwe, we have a Data Protection Act which was enacted in December of 2021, and it also amends. What I want to emphasize also is that it is amending the Criminal Code Reform Act, and this is where provisions are coming in that speak to the aspect of cyberbullying and harassment. So just to flag that indeed it is a criminal offense to perpetrate any form of cyberbullying, and this can include demeaning. And I think we have seen that being normalized, particularly on the platform, especially on Twitter, actually. And I mean, there's a criminal penalty, of course, which should amount to about 5 years imprisonment or a fine, or actually be a combination of both. And I've seen also even journalists being charged with this provision of cyberbullying and harassment, depending on some form of reporting that they could have done. And of course, I do have problems with that approach, utilizing that provision to undermine free expression instead of ensuring that we protect real victims or survivors of violence online. But also we have seen, I think, one case where an individual recorded in a scenario where a police officer was being jeered by people, I think it's someplace in Manila, and of course that person also was arrested for after sharing that video on TikTok. So when you think about cyberbullying, I think I need to emphasize these key aspects that I mentioned in the law, that when you use a computer or information system, which can include, social media for cyber after sharing that video on TikTok. So when you think about cyberbullying, I think I need to emphasize these key aspects that I mentioned in the law, that when you use a computer or information system, which can include, social media as well, to generate or send a data message, and then you are doing that with an intention to coerce, to intimidate, to harass, to threaten, or to cause substantial or distress, or even to degrade and humiliate, you'll be guilty of that offense. And actually, the imprisonment is 10 years, not 5. And what I want to highlight for us to realize is that we are doing all of these things on Twitter and on other social media platforms. We are always degrading people, we're intimidating them, we're humiliating them, we are demeaning them. So many times others do memes, others do short videos, using different methods to undertake either one of these aspects. So you find that what I want to emphasize is that indeed cyberbullying and harassment has been normalized. And what I want from the listeners is to appreciate that it is a criminal offense, and some people have been arrested before for contravening this provision. And there's a chance that either of us, any one of us, can be found on the wrong side of the law.
Thank you so much, Nompilo, for that contribution. By the way, guys, today is World Press Freedom Day. So today we're celebrating World Press Freedom Day.
I just going to contribute shortly about the role of social media, especially with the impending elections happening in our country. You see, the problem with social media, I can say 95% of the stuff is spreading lies, and social media has made people lazy to think for themselves or to look for information for themselves. If a popular person tweets anything which is even false, they run with that, and no one cares to check. You see, so they are confusing people. People need information to make decisions, but if the information you have is not accurate, you will make wrong decisions. So, and social media is not regulated, unlike print newspapers, television, and there's no regulation there. I can see some countries are trying to, make it a crime for certain tweets, but that's not enough, because a lot of people come as ghosts. You see, to show that social media is not quite good for the future or for our elections. The people who will be tweeting, most of them are ghosts. You all know them, So, and there's a head mentality, they all go and run with a thing just tweeted by one person behind the keyboard, which might not be not true. No one tries to, try to see the veracity of the information. There's competition to tweet. There's competition to tweet, competition to be the one who's got more information, and this leads to a lot more falsehood and propaganda. So that's what I can say. Social media, no, not good. Unfortunately, only a few people have access to it. The majority of voters in Zimbabwe don't have access to it, and they don't care about it. And yeah, thank you guys.
Well, thanks so much, Penat, for that contribution this morning. Let's go back to Dr. Mphathisini over there. Dr. Mphathisini, Penat spoke about the issue of citizen journalism, right? To say social media, people spread fake news and so on. And if someone...
Yes, the issue of citizen journalism is quite pertinent in our contemporary society now, because it has really undermined the whole notion of what constitutes a journalist. Generally, there's always been a hierarchy in terms of what journalism is and who is a journalist and what constitutes news. But now, in the era of social media, we have got a situation where ordinary people can also engage in what we regard as journalistic work. And these ordinary people, they do not have formal training, formal journalism training, and these are the people that we regard as citizen journalists. So the question really is, in terms of regulation, should we regulate citizen journalists? Is it okay to regulate citizen journalists? And one of my my lecturers used to talk about like whenever people were saying that a journalist should not do this, a journalist should do this, he would say, who is the Greek goddess of journalism in terms of who defines what a journalist is? But now I think this is quite a pertinent issue in our contemporary society, because in this era of social media, there are concerns that citizen journalists they are involved in spreading false information. They're involved in disinformation campaigns. They're involved in spreading misinformation or disinformation. But now, in terms of regulation, should we regulate citizen journalists in terms of how they post and what they should post? Sometimes I'm very skeptical of issues to do with regulation, because we need to have some form of balance in terms of promoting freedom of expression on the one hand, whilst we uphold issues to do with regulation, because we need to have some form of balance in terms of promoting freedom of expression on the one hand, whilst we uphold issues to do with ethics. So in terms of the journalism profession, there are values, there are ethics, there are codes of conduct. So the regulation, in a way, should be in line with the journalism values of truth, the journalism values of objectivity, journalism values of issues to do with ethics. But we should be skeptical in a way in terms of really regulating them to an extent that it really undermines our freedom of expression. But at the same time, this is very important, because we are heading towards elections, and usually during that such period, there are always disinformation campaigns. But some of these disinformation campaigns, or some of this false information, they're not really just spread by citizen journalists, but even other prominent people, even other mainstream newspapers. They've also been guilty of propagating false information. They've also been guilty of propagating propaganda. So it's not just really about citizen journalists being solely responsible for undermining democracy, but citizen journalists, the emergence of citizen journalists has always been associated with solely responsible for undermining democracy. But citizen journalists, the emergence of citizen journalists has always been associated with giving a voice to ordinary people, given that the legacy media, or given that the mainstream media has always been regarded as elitist, is promoting the voices or promoting the views of those who are in power, promoting the views of the affluent communities. But citizen journalism emerged as a way of promoting the voices of the ordinary people whose voices are excluded in the mainstream spaces. So when we are regulating citizen journalism, or when we are regulating citizen journalism, or when we are regulating citizen journalists, we should take into consideration that in an ideal society, citizen journalists would be will be the voice of the voiceless, will be the voice of those people who are not given a space, space in mainstream systems. But I'm happy that there have been a lot of trainings on citizen journalists. I think there are a lot of organizations who are doing well in terms of equipping citizen journalists, what some regard as community reporters, in terms of how they can report, in terms of how they can produce and share news.
I'd want to reflect. I mean, I know journalism is a concept that is, quite ongoing and quite trendy at the moment. But what we need to appreciate is that whatever we're calling citizen journalism is merely citizens that are expressing themselves and that are sharing information and that are contributing to public debate and interactive dialogue. Whatever that is, whichever term you might want to use, this is merely citizens exercising their fundamental rights. Having said that, I am also, my personal opinion really, and something that I've been spearheading is my personal opinion really, and something that I've been spearheading as part of his previous work through the media of Southern Africa was that, I'm strongly against regulation of, citizen journalists. I'm putting this in, because we have seen what regulation does anyway. We have seen what regulation does anyway in terms of fundamental rights, using even proper journalism as an example, using media regulation in Zimbabwe as an example. The regulation of the media in Zimbabwe has resulted in so much self-censorship. It has resulted even in terms of unjustifiable infringement of that same media freedom. So I'm definitely strongly against the regulation of citizen journalists. But what I would suggest that we need to ensure that we equip citizen journalists, because when we speak about citizen journalists, mainly the conversation has been centered on community champions, because we do have people that are in low and marginalized communities that are ensuring that their peers in those areas are able to receive information. For me, I want to identify whoever we are calling citizen journalists, rather to be community champions. And those people have been at the forefront of ensuring that they disseminate information, in areas where the information ecosystem is actually skewed and where some of the citizens have very limited access to information. And having said that, I would suggest that instead of any form of regulation, we actually equip those citizens and ensure that they are able to receive the necessary info, ensure that they're able, to undertake that in a way that they are responsible, that they're professional, that they're ethical, and that the information that they share is information that is truthful and that is not bordering on either illegal content that would result in any form of infringement, either be it hate speech or be it even racism or xenophobia, or even border on even ethnic discrimination, but just to ensure that they can still exercise their that role in the community, but in a responsible manner and in an ethical manner as well.
Yeah, I think you are raising very pertinent issues in terms of social media providing a space for political engagements and also as a space for propaganda. For propaganda, I think there's a lot of issues that are related to social media, and that are also related to the way in which the Nerorists and the Barakashi are operating. On one hand, one would look at it as a way as part of the whole political processes, where social media is providing space for political opponents and their supporters to engage in all these debates, which is actually different from the mainstream newspapers or from the mainstream media. If you are to look at the Herald or the Chronicle or the Newsday, which have always been mainstream newspapers, which have always been seen as polarized along political lines. We've got state media on one hand, and then we've got on the other hand pro-opposition media. But with social media, it becomes a space, it becomes an arena for all these political engagements. But unfortunately, these political engagements sometimes they take in the form of bullying, in the form the dissemination of false information and also all forms of online hate, But in terms of the impacts, in terms of the impacts, actually, maybe I'll talk more about the impacts of social media. Maybe if I look at Twitter in terms of elections, generally there are two views. On one hand, there are people who believe that social media or Twitter, they can the fake news or the false information that disseminated on social media, that information can sway public opinion, and it can manipulate public opinion and discredit democracy or discredit elections. So there are some people who are arguing that this false information or the misinformation and disinformation campaigns have got implications on elections, have got implications on democracy in the sense that social media can be used to discredit political candidates. It can be used in terms of people posting false information about candidates, defecting, people posting fake poll reports, and this has got some implications. It can undermine democracy. It can also undermine the public trust in electoral institutions, maybe such as ZEC, and also in the whole electoral process. But on the other hand, there are some people who are arguing that some of these arguments about algorithms, some of these arguments about chatbots and also deepfake, how all these issues undermining elections in Africa. There's an argument that there's lack of empirical research that can show that there's a direct relationship or there's a direct correlation between people's exposure to deepfakes and their electoral choices. In other words, there is false information, or when someone is exposed to deepfakes or chatbots on social media, that will determine, that will make them change their choices of a political candidate. For instance, if someone is supporting CCC, just because they've been exposed to a deepfake video which undermines CCC, it does not necessarily mean that they are going to vote for CCC. There are other factors that we have to take into consideration. So we should not assume that social media has got some omnipotent power. It is believing them. So there are a lot of issues about issues to do with access, issues to do with affordability, and most of the times there is social media implications on voter decisions. Sometimes people already have their candidate, even if there is all this false information on Twitter, it won't even change their choices, political choices, when it comes to election. So I think we need to have some form of balance without giving too much power to social media, but understand the issues of social context, issues of social, cultural, and economic context that underpin our society.
It's a very interesting observation. We need to acknowledge that in Zimbabwe we do have media polarization, and as you rightly said, there's a perception, that state media provides coverage mainly for the ruling party, while you also note that private media is also viewed as providing information, particularly for the opposition and the likes. And then social media comes in, of course, definitely as a parallel market. And I mean, it's an open platform, I think. Like one of the listeners was saying, that it's providing a platform for everyone across the board to be able to access information. And I think one of the conversations that I've had, particularly with political actors around the information because in Zimbabwe, is that even particularly on social media, people do not trust government sources. We have the Ministry of Information, for example. There's a Twitter handle. They're very active. The permanent secretary is equally very active. But you'll find that some of the even government sources, particularly on social media, they are not viewed as reliable sources by the audience. So you'll find that the audience on social media is relying on other sources to access information, including fellow citizens, and that information is some of the information we should regard as reliable information vis-a-vis information that is coming from state-owned agencies or even from state-owned. So I want to agree that indeed social media has provided a platform for parallel of information, but also the key concerns that we still see even on non-traditional media, you will see them on social media as well. The issues of polarization, issues of who can be regarded as a reliable source of information. So those key issues still remain even on the social media platforms as well.
In this era, elections social media will tilt, is an effective tool. If we were in developed countries where internet is available to everyone, countries like Germany, New Zealand, USA, everyone has internet unlimited. In our case, I think unlimited. People in Harare, Bulawayo, Gweru, Masvingo, those who are urbanized might be able to get something. I drove to the rural areas most of the times, and I know there are many places I can get network. And also the people there, getting $1 to buy the data, like, these 5 gigabytes that we are seeing for WhatsApp, like the data, I saw that you are getting data for WhatsApp only. What about Facebook? What about for other things? So in Zimbabwe, it will be of use in urban areas, but in rural areas, it will not create any impact.
But they are not really looking at a broader spectrum, that even when we back to the mainstream media, we have always had misinformation, especially in Zimbabwe. We have always, you watch ZTV, sometimes you laugh at the news that they are bringing to the people. And a whole TV station, that is run by the government, sponsored by the people of Zimbabwe, the broadcast lies. So for us to only look at social media from a bad light, I think we are not being genuine. We are not being genuine to stick to the effects of social media. Because let's look at social media in this daily age. Let's go back. We have seen the Arab Spring uprising that were fueled by media. We look at even the current elections that happened. That happened in Nigeria? Look at majority of the campaign and the materials being posted on social media. You go to Kenya, look at their elections that they held. Most of the campaigning and stuff like that was happening on social media. You go back to ours in Zimbabwe, we have 42% I believe, most of us, they have access to social media. So we look at that. What influence does it have? It means it has influence of approximately 42% of our population that has access to the social media. And they may be likely taking it to say, maybe between 30 or 25% or 50% of the 42%, they are registered voters, and some of them have not decided on who to vote, and they are interacting slowly with some of the candidates here on social media and talking to them and saying, no, I want to be your MP. I want to be your councillor. And some are being swayed to vote for that candidate because they've interacted with the candidate on Twitter, on Facebook, and on different social platforms that we have as a country. And I'm not going to lie and say social media is not bad. It has got its own bad stuff and its own propaganda, because there's not always an impromptu checking of what is being presented, and there are no balances because we don't even have a governing body that governs to see what everyone is doing and checking the facts. Yes, that could be the disadvantage, but the advantages I've seen, if you go back and you look here, through the formation of CCC, we had a space that was been running, I think now, that is raising funds, and they've managed to raise hundreds of thousands of funds. It shows me if they are raising this money towards elections. It's showing me that social media has played a role in raising funds for a political party which is in Zimbabwe. So that's an effective and a positive contribution that social media he has made, because some of us wouldn't have contributed towards Triple C if that platform was not there. We had to contribute because that platform every day it was there. So we went to that platform and we started contributing. It means it's effective and it's working. I remember the elections last year in March. Contributions were done through social media. Things were bought through social media. They will come here and say, guys, people like this, they need so much. And the people who contribute towards that. That's the effective of social media. And the last thing that I would like to contribute again is the issue that has to do with news. The advantage of social media is that now you can instantly someone can post something currently happening in Tolojo. And I'm here in South Africa, I can read and find out, oh, this is happening in Tolojo, where ZBC is not, where other big media houses are not, even there. I've seen videos of what actual fact is happening in Zimbabwe that not even ZTV or other media have covered, but we've seen it and we've verified it to say, yeah, this thing has happened in such and such a place because someone took a video and posted it on social media. So we are living in the age of information. So if you are living in an age of information, they are the good and the bad, and propaganda will always be there in the mix. So we need to tread carefully, as we have always done with ZTV and other mainstream media houses. Doesn't mean they don't lie. They have lied so many times. But anyway, thank you so much, Brighton and Nonhlanhla, for giving me the opportunity to air my views. But I think social media, right now, here we are discussing social media on this very social media platform. There are hundreds of us that are here listening. How many people are being informed and impacted by this, and how many votes are being swayed so that they tilt their vote towards the ruling or the opposition through this social media platform? Thank you so much, Brighton and Nonhlanhla, for the opportunity.
Just also clarify that I'm sharing this feedback not on behalf of MISA, as I work with the International Press Institute now. But yeah, I mean, when that
we seem to have lost Nompilo there, but okay, please go ahead.
Hear me? Oh, my apologies. It seems I was muted. So yeah, thank you so much for raising that, right? And I'd actually say that this is quite a relevant conversation because it's something that has happened before in 2018 and it's happening now. And I'm sharing this fact not on behalf of MISA, as I work with the International Press Institute now, but it's work that I'm familiar with, and it's something that we have championed and we have challenged before. And I know even now, MISA did write to POTRAS in its capacity as the Data Protection Authority to inquire on what is happening. My personal perspective is that it's definitely amounts the violation of data protection and privacy. It's definitely against the principles that are highlighted in the Cyber and Data Protection Act. And because when information, such personal identifying information is given third party, that should be done with the concern of the data subject, and the data subject should actually be notified. But you'll find that in this scenario, no one was actually notified of the development. And I would want to even flag that I personally believe this is also being done in line of constituencies, because when I received the message, I received it and I was recognized as a resident in Rishani, and it's simply because Rishani is my town and that is where I registered for. And I think that with so many other people around me, that when they received this message, the location that was being identified in that message was a location where they are registered. So it's something that we definitely should look into, I believe. And I think that with so many other people around me, that when they received this message, the location that was being identified in that message was a location where they are registered. So it's something that we definitely should look into. I believe that it's a data breach. I believe that it's a violation of the Data Protection Act. And I believe that POTRAS, as the Protection Authority, should step up and look into that issue, because definitely the citizens' personal identifying information is being used for purposes that it was not collected for.
Thank you so much, Nompilo. So,
through, people are commenting on this topic this morning. I see one of the comments that says, use of social media platforms is brought about a space that allows for dissenting views and allows for citizens to actively participate in political dialogue without being censored. However, digital divide remains an obstacle, especially for those living in marginalized areas. Speaks about in rural areas, they don't even have access to neutral space and so on. And someone says mainstream media, mainstream newsrooms, they lie more than social media. They are also ones pushing propaganda. Interesting there. And the last one says, we get matters from social media platforms. That's where we get news than as compared to mainstream media platforms. Quite interesting there.
Yeah, quite interesting what's happening. But I say we have Boss Salani.
What I wanted to really appreciate is the fact that social media has given us, especially citizens that are outside of the country, if you're not at home and you're abroad, what social media has done has connected us. It has connected us to our roots. It has connected us in the way that we are more preview to things that are happening on the ground back home. We feel a part of it. We feel informed, and of course there will be misinformation from time to time. Why it is so important, and that's why it's so important for people to verify facts, what you see, what you hear, because people can manipulate it. Propaganda does happen. So if you look at the positive side of this, we're looking at Zimbabwe right now. When we look at our elections have always and quite frequently, so upsettingly, been rigged. There's no credibility. There's no, all the frequently, so upsettingly been rigged. There's no credibility. There's no, all those tenets that we expect for free, credible elections, we're not getting. So what social media has done has opened an avenue where we're preview to certain things that happen. There's a lot of issues where you go to the polling stations. We see, if someone takes a video or a clip or pictures, we're able to see what is happening, get an idea of the current tough situation or the numbers that are showing up at polling stations. That type of information, if used wisely, does help us to paint a bigger picture of what's actually happening, whether there are issues to be addressed, whether there's problematic areas. All that information, especially when it's put out there for all to see, it allows us to ask those crucial questions. And when you ask those crucial questions about are things being done properly, what happens is you expect a response. And what social media has allowed us to do now is to hold our leaders to account. If you see something happening in your area and there's been a picture or a mention or a video or a little clip, it doesn't even take that long, just a single little clip, you're able to ask those crucial questions. And what I've seen, you're starting to see that the politicians are aware of the power that social media has, because silence in itself, especially when it comes to those who are political leaders, can actually show you when that something is going on some way, somehow. And what they do, as you've noticed, they start to come up with little statements and this and that to try and avoid a situation where there's a huge firestorm of questions that start to sprout up. So that really makes the whole playing field so much interesting now, because it's no longer like the olden days or the Stone Age days where we had to wait for that information to come from those in leadership. Now citizens can actually go out there, seek out the information, get the evidence, get little clips, little videos, things like that, and share it with the rest of the world. And so that discussion, it does help us, and it does ensure that those who are in places of power get to a point where they start to understand that the world is changing and they need to change likewise. Now, also going on the issue of the importance of social media, we also have to realize that this power, this new social media presence that we've seen, it also can be abused. How do we see it being abused? Well, let's give you an example of Twitter Spaces, right? Or even the Twitter accounts. You see that of the importance of social media. We also have to realize that this power, this new social media presence that we've seen, it also can be abused. How do we see it being abused? Well, let's give you an example of Twitter Spaces, right? Or even the Twitter accounts. You see that people can even come as ghosts and start commenting. There's attack on citizens as well. So people tend to overuse that ability to be able to communicate with someone who's maybe far away from you, just because we are now being linked by Twitter. And some will be positive comments, others are actually attacks against citizens. So it shows you that it can be abused. Any power, if not used properly, be abused. And it's my sincere hope that people will see the benefit more than the negatives of social media presence. We definitely need it in Zimbabwe. We definitely want to know what's going on. If you're going to vote for someone, you want to see what they're doing in your communities. You can't just take their words for it. We want to see those images. We want the political leaders or politicians to show us those videos of their work that they're doing. And also, we don't just want to see the videos that they make themselves. There's this thing about when politicians are doing their work. They always want to present the good side of things. But what we see now, we have citizens who'll be like, okay, this politician showed us a video of them maybe erecting a pole, a telephone pole, something, or a bus stop, a stop sign poles, right? And then they're trying to paint a good picture. I'll give you an example. And then you find another citizen who give us another side to it to say, okay, they built that stop sign in that area, but look at how the roads are not working. Look at the pothole-infested roads. So that already tells us two different stories. And then it becomes the right of a citizen to question things and say, okay, you showed us this picture of you erecting a stop sign, but what are you doing about the roads in your community? What are you going to do to answer the questions and the frustrations of those in your constituents? So I hope you understand what I'm saying, that we do need that. We need to see both sides, because it's been hard for Zimbabweans a lot of the time. We've been lied to. We've been given false promises. The frustrations of those in your constituents. So I hope you understand what I'm saying, that we do need that. We need to see both sides, because it's been hard for Zimbabweans a lot of the time. We've been lied to. We've been given false promises. But what social media is now allowing us to do is to go back to those politicians and say, Abba, what are you doing? Why didn't you do this? Why don't you do that? And also, it allows for new sort of leaders to come in. Leaders who are able to be transparent and accountable to their constituents, and you can start to measure the goods and the bads. So I'll land there for now. Thank you so much.
I think, as my parting shot, what I'd want to highlight is that there is greater value that can be derived from social media platforms to particularly inform access to information for Zimbabweans, diverse access to information, and I think we should utilize the platform. But as we do that as well, we should also be innovative to ensure that people run marginalized communities can also access information, but also ensure that the information we receive and that we communicate is also truthful. Very much.